And Mayra, it's good to see you. We look forward to having others meet you as well. Do we have some announcements? Doug, how many folks do we have registered for Pathways to Hope?
As of yesterday, we have about 850. I think we'll have right at 1,000 registered. So there's still plenty, there's still time to register. I put all the information in the chat, including the link. Well, I don't know. I just don't know if I could be any more excited, Ann. So about the conference, because of the quality of the speakers and the workshops and just the wonderful opportunity for everybody to get together after COVID. So I'm excited.
Oh, good. I know, though, there are others even watching this today who are still in isolation due to health risk. And so it's really great that Pathways is going to be recorded. And I've even suggested to someone who is new in their position to later watch all of the recordings. And that would be a great immersion into the things that are happening in our city in terms of mental health and community healing. So it's going to be a great resource even beyond those 2 days. Any other announcements while we get some few more folks into the screen this morning? Raphael, why don't you introduce yourself? You're new in the community and new at Incarnate Word. Tell us about where you moved from, because you did it quick, and what you're going to be doing at Incarnate Word.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ann. Appreciate giving me a minute. Yes, I am indeed new at Incarnate Word. Not that new, but new considering that.
Raphael, you unmute. You just accidentally, there you go.
I think it said the host muted me. So I thought maybe I said the wrong thing.
You did. No.
But no, I am new, but not that new. I've been here for 3 years, but my capacity changed about a year ago, and I became director of the Lewis Center of the Americas. And one of our thematic pillars for the work we'll be doing is immigration. And through a couple of initiatives that we advanced in the last 6 months, I got to know Tino Gallegos, and we're working together on a couple of things. And so I was introduced to this group, and also from my good colleague, Sister Martha Ann Kirk. So again, immigration is a topic that is one of the thematic pillars of the Lewis Center of the Americas, a new center at the University of the Incarnate Word. And one specific announcement is, and perhaps the announcement's already been made by Tino or by Mayra, is the Welcoming Week event we will be hosting at UIW early next month, which is coming right up with the documentary that we'll be showing, The Price of a Dream, Professor Nishikawa's documentary, and the poetry readings. I think it's going to be a terrific event, and I hope that everyone can make it.
Raphael, what is your official title?
My official title is Director of the Liza and Jack Lewis Center of the Americas at the University of the Incarnate Word. And I come from, I have an apartment in San Antonio. My main residence is in Dripping Springs, Texas. I've been in Texas for 25 years in my recently, but my family is from northern Mexico. Of course, as many of us here in this conference, immigration is very close to my heart, from family members that themselves were immigrants. And so I consider myself kind of I belong, using the wording of our Welcoming Week slogan, I belong in San Antonio, and I feel like I'm a part of the La Región de Texas y Coahuila, the region of Texas and Coahuila. And again, very, very, very happy to be joining this. I think this is my third meeting. And by the way, I will also say that I really enjoyed Melody's presentation at our last meeting. I thought it was terrific. and she will be speaking at our Student Leadership Symposium in October, which will focus on immigration and planning. And that will be for all 3 UIW campuses in Irapuato, in Mexico City, and here in San Antonio. And the focus will be on immigration. It's a 3-day symposium for students.
Thank you, Raphael. Just so you know, the intersection is now being powered, thank goodness, by sacred.org, San Antonio Community Resource Directory.
Okay.
And so those recordings, Bill, you might want to put that in chat, but all of the ones that have been recorded, and there are quite a few now, are online. So I know others have been using the recordings like in staff meetings or with their community. So you might want to go there on lots of different community concerns that we're working on. So this summer, what we've been doing is quite methodically and carefully looking at all the collaboratives that have been formed, and we've kind of been doing them in order of the formation. So we're getting the first ups that have been at it for a while and more developed. And then we're going to be getting into quite shortly those that are kind of new on the scene and doing some incredible work in terms of community healing, responses to, more violent situations in our community and how we respond. So we did hear from Melody Woolsey a couple weeks ago, and she brought us a briefing on the large collaborative effort of welcoming immigrants into San Antonio. And so today kind of is the other part of that, is the welcoming of refugees into San Antonio as well. I hope this isn't the last time that Tino Gallegos is going to be with us, but he officially is going to introduce us to the new city immigration officer who will be taking his position while he goes and actually is going to be an attorney all the time, like he would like to be an attorney all the time. So Tino's going to be bringing us a briefing on the collaborative efforts around refugees in San Antonio. And it's all yours, Tino.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks, everyone. Great to see everyone here at the intersection again. I know I've been at the intersection a couple of times in the past. And for those who I haven't had the chance to meet, I am now the outgoing immigration liaison for the city of San Antonio. I'm the other half of the yin and yang of liaisons with Anne. So our newest immigration liaison, I think maybe we'll have a chance to see her after the presentation, I guess, because that'll be, we won't be having our screens focused on the presentation that's here. But Mayra Montero is our new immigration liaison, and I'd like to have a chance for her to talk after we're done with this presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you the briefing on refugees, since this is something that I've had the chance to work on during my tenure as the immigration liaison here in San Antonio for the last 4.5 years. And it's been interesting because there's been interesting times, as I'm sure that you all can relate, right? And did you want to do the presentation slides, or I can do it through share screen?
I'm trying to get it to work. I'll get it to work here in a minute.
Okay.
You want to introduce Mayra real quick?
Yeah. So everyone, drum roll. Okay, we have Mayra Montero. She is joining us today on this meeting. But go ahead and can unmute and say hi, I guess.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mayra Montero. I'm so excited to meet you all in Zoom. I hope I get to see you in person. So a little bit about me. So I was born in Dallas, but my parents took me to Mexico when I was 2. So I grew up in Guanajuato, Mexico until I was 12 years old, and I came to the US to the Valley, the Rio Grande Valley, La Feria, Santa Maria area. I graduated from there and went to my undergrad in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I was out there kind of just like not knowing anybody, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I stayed in Michigan for a couple of years. I did a lot of work with immigrant and refugees over there in Michigan, in Battle Creek area, Kalamazoo. And I got so passionate about this community. And all my professional career has been in nonprofits. Before coming to San Antonio, I was working with ProBar, which is it's part of the American Bar Association. It's a nonprofit that provides services to unaccompanied minors in the Rio Grande Valley. So I was a paralegal. I was doing presentations, Know Your Rights presentations, just talking to the community. And I'm just very excited to be part here of this amazing mission that you all have to just welcome, our immigrants and refugees. And I hope I can, learn from you all. I'm sure I'm going to learn from all of you and work together. Thank you so much, Tino.
Welcome, Mayra.
Thank you, Mayra. Yes, welcome. So on refugees, let's go to the next slide. I think it's just important to kind of understand, and I really love this slide. I've used it on many a presentation for many years. The difference between people who have this official refugee status, and those who are seeking asylum. So what I like about this graphic is it shows you very simply these 4 categories of people who are basically the same thing under the law. So refugee status is something that's established by a UN agreement, the Refugee Convention of 1951, which the US signed onto, and the United States then later on took the obligations from the Refugee Convention, this treaty, and then put them into our federal law, right? So it's part of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And it governs the way that we deal with people who are fleeing their countries because of fear of persecution. Under this international treaty and international law, that is a person's right. And the reason why we have refugee status is because there were so many shameful episodes before 1951, especially during World War II, where there were a lot of people who were trying to get away from being persecuted, especially by the Nazis in Germany, who could not get a visa to go to a different country. They were turned away and ultimately had to return back to Germany or occupied Poland or wherever they were, and were picked up and put into concentration camps, and they died, right? So the world after World War II said, this is unacceptable. We need to come up with a way for people to leave their country and go and live somewhere else and have a legal way to do that. That's why they set up the Refugee Convention, and that's why it exists. So we have in the United States, the way that we've decided to put this into practice is that we have what's called the formal refugee resettlement process. That is A, this first arrow you see here, A. And this is for people who, we've seen, all of us, pictures on the news of people who live in refugee camps that are outside of their country. I think in my lifetime, I'm always reminded of the ones that were Ethiopians that were like in Kenya or in Tanzania or those places where there's large camps, or it's people in the Middle East, Syrians that are living in Syria. And in our day and age, it's Syrians who are living in Turkey. They're not in their country, they're in a camp, and they are looking to go somewhere else, right? The camp is just a temporary place. They're looking to go somewhere else. So they have an interface with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, who works with the US State Department. They do a whole bunch of background checks on people. And then if they're given the refugee status, they are given the refugee paperwork to come into the country. And then they're connected with the Refugee Resettlement Agency here in the United States, in the community where they're going to live, okay? San Antonio has 3 of these refugee resettlement agencies. One of them is a division of Catholic Charities of San Antonio. Raíces has a division that does refugee resettlement exclusively. And we have another one that's fairly new called Refugee Services of Texas. The refugee resettlement agencies receive federal money to help these refugees that are arriving to set up their lives. Typically, a refugee gets assigned to a country. They don't have any connection to the country. They don't know anybody. So they need housing. They need to be enrolled in school. They need, to get all of the kind of paperwork that we have here in the United States, things like Social Security numbers, Texas state IDs. They need to establish a connection with healthcare. They need kind of like orientation on what the expectations are for them in a country, culturally, dealing with a law enforcement, or how to call, an ambulance, these kind of basics about life in their new country. That's what the refugee resettlement agencies do. So we have, again, 3 of these in San Antonio, and they assist people who are assigned to live in San Antonio coming from outside the country directly here. We also have people who are asylum seekers, right? And you heard from Melody, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago, about the Migrant Resource Center. And we've heard a lot about the migrants who are seeking asylum at the southern border from places like Venezuela, from Cuba, from Haiti. There's a couple of different ways that people can seek asylum. We have people who come and they're seeking what's called affirmative asylum. So they come into the United States, maybe they already have a visa to travel, a tourist visa, or maybe they're here, a temporary work visa. They don't want to return to the country. Let's just say you were a person from Russia, you came to the United States in 2021, you were against the war in Ukraine, but your visa is up and you're study abroad, and now they're saying you have to go back to Russia, and you say, I don't want to go back to Russia because I've said all these things on my blog, I've pasted all these things, against the war, and I'll be put in prison if I go back to Russia. That would be an affirmative asylum process under B. Under C is the one that we see at the border today. People who are fleeing persecution, they show up at the border and they're being asked to be let into the country so they can seek asylum, right? That claim is either going to be determined by an immigration court or an immigration asylum officer. The way that we deal with it in the United States is if you're going in front of the asylum officer or in front of the immigration court and you don't win, then you are subject to being deported back to your country of origin, okay? Then we have what's called defensive asylum. It's somebody who is also kind of in the same situation as in C. They're fleeing persecution, and during the time that they're in the United States, they lose their status, and now they are claiming asylum as a defense to deportation. They've been picked up by immigration, now they're claiming as a defense to deportation. So it's just important to keep these in mind because a lot of what we're going to be talking about is the A process. So people who are working with our resettlement agencies, that's how it was working with the Afghan evacuees last year. Okay, next slide, Ann.
Okay. Doesn't want to go next.
Oh, no.
It's like, no, I don't want to go. There.
All right. So as part of that refugee resettlement process, I described that A trajectory, that line there, that arrow. I think people are surprised to learn that Texas is the state that resettles more refugees than any other state. It could be California because they have more people, but it's Texas. Like Texas resettles more refugees than anybody else they have since 2010. And this is despite the fact that the state government has withdrawn all of its support for refugees, and it's solely supported by nonprofit agencies and the federal government. Next slide. So why do refugees choose San Antonio? Again, as you saw in the previous slide, Texas has been a top destination, and San Antonio has historically had a robust refugee resettlement infrastructure. So this means we've had really good people that work with refugees here, and they have been innovative, and we also have had traditionally, I think we can all relate to this, we traditionally had low cost of living, especially in housing, and a lot of, as you saw, to resettle in California, and again, these agencies have a budget for each family, they've got to find housing, right, to pay for it. So it's better to go to a place where the money is stretched a little bit longer. But also here in San Antonio, we have this moniker, Military City USA, with a large military presence, a lot of veterans. So all the Afghans and Iraqis who assisted the military during the global war on terror, they were welcomed here, especially by their veteran comrades. So they wanted to help the people that served with them, the people that helped them in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so they really have advocated a lot for their people that they served with to come and join them here in San Antonio. And also San Antonio has received both planned. So again, when the US State Department takes people in, they decide, okay, what city are we going to send them to? They kind of make this determination based on available resources and, looking at where they have been sending people in the past and make sure they don't put too many people in one place or the other. They have sent people planned in certain amount of numbers, but there's also been a lot of unplanned arrivals because refugees who arrive to other parts of the US, they are told by their friends and relatives that live here in San Antonio, why don't you come over here, right? And that has happened a lot, especially with the Afghan community. Next slide, please. So we're coming up on the anniversary of the Kabul evacuation. The Taliban, as everyone may remember, took over Afghanistan after the US military left. Some of these Afghans were already in the process for getting visas to come to the United States because they had served and helped the US military and were in the process of getting what's called a special immigrant visa to come to the US, but it was a long process and they hadn't been finished. Some Afghans had not applied for anything, but all of them had to be moved quickly outside of the country. So we had, and I think we remember, about 75,000 people who were airlifted out of Kabul, many of them to military bases, both in the United States, but also outside the US, like in Dubai and some of these other locations, but in the US and 4 locations in the 48 states and then in Guam. Next slide, please. So how many came to San Antonio? Again, Texas was a top destination for Afghan evacuees last year. We had our 4 cities in the top 12 who received these 75,000 Afghans who came to the US. And Houston was the top one in the country, and San Antonio was number 4 on the official numbers, again, of people who were assigned to live here. So we had about 1,700 people who were resettled here from, I believe, September to March was when we stopped our count. And we have had also a lot of people who were initially assigned somewhere else, Afghans who were assigned to different other cities in the United States who decided they would rather come to San Antonio. So we have about 2,000 to 2,500 Afghans who arrived outside of that formal assignment system. So we have 1,700 plus about 2,500, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4,000 Afghans that arrived since last year. Next slide. You'll see here the principal countries of origin for our resettled refugees. This comes from the agencies. You'll see Afghanistan is first, followed by Iraq, again, because of the military connection. But we also have had sizable populations of people arrive from Myanmar, also known as Burma, and Iran, and a few other countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, from Nepal at the beginning of the teens of that decade. So we've had a lot of different groups of people start to arrive in San Antonio, and a lot of them, the refugee resettlement agencies will have them housed and start their lives in the medical center area. Okay, and so this is really interesting because it has created an interesting community in the medical center area. We have a lot of international restaurants and groceries. We have some of our most diverse schools that are in the Northeast School District and Northside School District that serve the medical center area families. And that is also just an area where there has been a lot of big apartment buildings, a lot of housing there. So there's now that we're, I think, probably 15, 20 years of refugees arriving in that area, we have a real sense of identity of place for the medical center area. People having the neighborhood have this certain character as an international neighborhood. Next slide, please. So we have, again, our refugee serving organizations, Catholic Charities of San Antonio. We have RAICES and the Refugee Services of Texas. These are the organizations that receive the federal money to receive the refugees and set them up with their new lives, right? So they provide that initial case management, getting people into houses, putting furniture in there, right? Putting food in the pantry. I mean, this is literally things that they do before someone arrives. They pick them at the airport, they take them there, right? They enroll the kids in school, they find jobs for the parents, find them English classes, all this kind of case management type of work that happens with refugees through these federally funded agencies. But it does have a limit. It can be, and they've tried these different programs to extend it, but usually it lasts about a year where they can receive this additional support from these federally funded agencies. And because refugees are coming in on the special status, they're also allowed to apply for and receive some of the public benefits, our social safety net benefits like food stamps, like TANF and Medicaid. But after a year, that all sort of fades away for them, right? So they have to be self-sufficient. They have to find a way to make it on their own. And it's difficult, right? It's not an easy thing to do even in 2 years or 3 years. So there are other agencies, and one of them that's had a long history here in San Antonio is the Center for Refugee Services on Wurzbach, a very small organization, but as they say, punches way above their weight. They do a lot of work with very few resources. They have just a few people on staff, but they provide services to people that are outside that 1 year. They have ongoing relationships with refugee community members, trying to orient them towards the next thing, right? That next thing being navigating the home buying process, or learning English for the parents who haven't had a chance after that first year. It's a lot of chaos, but moving through that, applying for citizenship once they are eligible to do that, all these other kinds of services and things that these federally funded agencies can't do after a certain period of time. Next slide, please.
Being stubborn again, sorry.
It's all right.
It gets tired or something. Is that it?
Yes, this is it. So I think this is just a good slide. And I include it because I think it's good for people to see this and get it. I'm a visual person, so I like to see these things visually with a little explanation. So later on, when I'm hoping we distribute this one out to people. If you want to learn more about refugee resettlement, what it all means, like I said, this is kind of the work that they do on the timeline that they're doing it, right? And it really runs the gamut from, again, furnishing apartments to picking people up, to registering people for classes, and arranging, helping people understand the transportation system, our different government institutions, all those kinds of things, culture. This is a way just to get an idea of it. Next slide. All right, so this is just a kind of way for us to look and visualize why we do these collaborative efforts, right? And I think the easiest way to understand some of these efforts, like what we did with the Afghan Refugee Response Collaboration and the MRC, is that they are collaborations between communities, community members, nonprofits, faith organizations, and our local government. Well, why do we do this? I think the easiest answer is that no one can do it alone. We found that it can be daunting for someone to say, I'm going to assume responsibility for this big thing, right? It's always easier for us to say, hey, I'll do it, but can you help me out with this thing, or this part of it, or I'm going to be needing support in this area. Be able to an agency that takes the lead, but somebody else is going to have to help me in providing these other services. The other reason we collaborate is there's a lot of energy out there from all of these different sectors of our community, and we want to be able to channel it to meet the most urgent needs. So we want to channel the energy and the resources to meet the most urgent needs. So we have to get together and decide what the most urgent needs are, and we ask questions and we talk to one another, and we then can prioritize how we're going to assign what we have out there as far as like volunteers or needs for donations or any of those kinds of things. That's how we decided. We've had prior collaboration models like the Migrant Resource Center, which I think Mel probably explained to you how it evolved in 2019 and how it's operating today.
Mhm.
Model, and I think this model too, everyone gets to do what they do best. I call it a potluck model. Everyone brings something to the potluck. You just have to have somebody there to make sure that we're not all bringing dessert, right? Someone's got to kind of say, okay, well, these are the needs, and so someone needs to bring plates, and someone needs to bring cups and drinks. But for the most part, you get to do the thing that you're good at, because that is the best use of you and your time and the resources that you have at your disposal. So next slide. So here we go. We're finally to the Afghan Refugee Response Collaboration. We have here in this diagram, again, the government, we have faith organizations, nonprofits, communities. We have the refugee community themselves, the people that we're trying to help. We have our website that we created, afghansnsa.org. The idea in this particular collaboration was to support these refugee serving organizations like Catholic Charities Raíces, like the Refugee Services of Texas, or the Center for Refugee Services, because they were the ones when people were started to come to San Antonio last fall, who were telling us, we're going to receive a couple hundred people this week. We have a need for some help. We also had a lot of people from all these different sectors who said, I really want to help these refugees, right? So it's just it's like matchmaking. Okay, you want to help? Here's a need. We're going to put you together. But we want to make sure that the help that we're providing to the refugee server organizations is the help that they need, right? We don't want to create more work for them. And so we want to try and get the right resources to them in the right way. So that was the idea. The community really wanted to support the refugee serving agencies. And it turns out we also started to support each other, right? We started to collaborate between organizations. So the lines didn't just go into the center. They started to actually work across ways. So we have faith organizations sometimes just working directly with refugees, or nonprofits that are working directly with faith organizations and vice versa. It was really a mutually supporting network of people. So one of those components, again, was the website. That was one of our initial things that we rolled out. That was, again, powered by Sacred. Thank you, Sacred. It was something that we were able to put up quickly so that people could very easily see. Because we had calls coming in, both to the agencies, to government, to nonprofits. How can I help? And it's kind of hard to do that over phone, right? Without having an organized way of presenting that information. So having a website that says, okay, here's how you can help. Here's some easy ways. Here are the organizations. Here's the contact people there. Here are the guidelines for donating things. Here are the guidelines for volunteering. Here's who's the person who can handle volunteer registration for all of these different projects. And here's some different volunteer projects that there are, because there's things like picking people up in the airport or working with the family to take them to a doctor appointment, or just moving furniture, right? That's honestly a thing that people did, and it was very, very helpful. So that was the idea behind the website. We also have biweekly meetings. Since I think September and October, we pretty regularly had biweekly meetings where we just sit around, not sit around.
We
sit
work.
around on WebEx.
I would just sit around.
Sit around. No, we don't just sit around. Where we meet together, we meet together and we talk through it. Right? We talk through it. We hear from our refugee servant organizations. They give us updates. They're like, this is where we're at. This is where we're having problems, and people can troubleshoot it, right? Or people bring something to the table. They say, I want to help in this way, or identify this resource. The refugee servant organizations say, great, wonderful. Let's get together and we'll see how we can make that happen, right? Let's take your resource and we'll bring it in. Next slide.
Again, I think it just gets tired.
All right, so through the ARC, the Afghan Refugee Response Collaboration, we have seeded collaborations, and I say seeded, we planted the seeds for it. Can't take responsibility for actually, making these things happen, because really it's, again, people just meeting each other and figuring out what they wanted to do. And offering. So we had these really great collaborations. The food bank offered to store donations for a couple of the refugee organizations who said, we don't have enough room for the donations that people want to give us. We don't have enough room to store them. And the food bank said, we'll store them. We have a big warehouse. We'll store them, and you let us know when you want them. We'll bring them to you, or we'll make arrangements with some of them. The food bank also offered their staff to assist with these public benefits applications. Again, the refugees are coming in, they're eligible to apply for food stamps, but that takes time for the refugee agency staff. So one of the things they were able to do was have food bank staff help with those benefits applications, because that's something that they do at the food bank, right? So it's easy for them to extend that service over to the refugee organizations. We had help again from the LDS Church, who their volunteers did an amazing job of assembling furniture and setting it up in apartments. It's something I think a lot of people didn't think was a needed service, but that was something that the Refugee Resettlement Agency said, we need help with this. Our staff, aside from picking people up at the airport, assisting with their paperwork, finding a place to live, has to set up their furniture and move it all around. They said, well, we can do that at a minimum, right? That's pretty easy. We had the Center for Refugee Services when there was issues with people's paperwork and them not able to apply for Medicaid, making arrangements with UHS and CareLink, and then signing up the families. He said, if you want, so anybody who doesn't have, who's having issues getting their families enrolled in Medicaid, we'll sign them up for CareLink, send them over to CRS, and we'll get that done. Right, that's an amazing thing to offer, and it would really help and met a need that was identified at the ARC meetings, and they were able to do that. Another one of them is the Communities of Welcome program, which was a collaborative effort between Culturelingua, Interfaith San Antonio Alliance, and the City of San Antonio, and for which we were able to then apply for a national grant with the Open Societies Foundation, and we were awarded $150,000 for this work. Next step, please. So how can people help? Well, at this moment, we are trying to find a way to maybe expand the ARC to help all refugees, right? To continue this collaboration with our refugee serving organizations. I think that they have found value in being connected to people who are wanting to help them and assist them. And I've got a good working relationship with some of the members of the ARC. So joining the ARC and helping us decide the future of the way the collaboration is going to work, I think is a great way to help. The Communities of Welcome, I think if you want to directly have contact with a newcomer Afghan family, you want to form that friendship and this informal network of support. That is what the Communities of Welcome is for. They've had a lot of really great events. They've done the Welcome Walk, and they're going to do that again this year in November. So I think we can share that information with the intersection. Maybe Nadia will come speak to you before that, but it's scheduled in November. They've had a sports day. They had a community fair day. They had a volunteer day where they actually had some of the newcomer Afghan families come out and do a community project, a cleanup of a green space. So they've been just working with people to kind of get them feeling like San Antonio was their home. And that means both just knowing what's out there and meeting people who want to extend the hand of friendship and help people feel like this is their home, right? So if you're interested in the Communities of Welcome, contact Nadia at Culturelingua, and she will find a way to get you involved. Another one is hiring. If there's people out there who are hiring, refugees have the right to work in the United States. So they're needing jobs to be able to be, again, self-sustaining. And I think a lot of people just find value in working. They feel like they're contributing. So if somebody has been looking for a job and they can't find one, they get very discouraged, right, in their new home. So hiring refugees is also a really great way to help. And then volunteering and donating to our refugee serving organizations. We have the information that's on the slide earlier. I guess the next slide might be the last one, but I also want to give a chance to Anne to talk a little bit about her experience with ARC, because she worked on it with me the whole time, and we're at this point trying to figure out where to go with it. So, what do you think?
One, Tino, I wanted to mention that it's 8:39. Are you able to stay for another 5 minutes, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to back up to this last one because next week, hopefully Communities of Welcome will be coming so that we'll be hearing more in depth of how that process works, because it works with congregations in that homing process and refugees becoming, full-time San Antonians like the rest of us. And there's, conversation also afoot of expanding that as well beyond the Afghan community. So we can kind of look at it as a kind of a pilot program. I don't think we called it that. This past year, it was filling a gap that was really needed, but really got beautiful results and relationships. There was a dinner not long ago, and we heard from some of those families, both sides of that relationship and what it's become. In fact, one of the gentlemen from, I think it was Temple Bethel within the Jewish community, But while the family was at their microphone talking about their experience of becoming San Antonians, he took the baby, and about 2 seconds later, the baby was asleep on his shoulder. So he, they're very much family and in relationship with each other. It's a very beautiful experience. So communities of welcome hopefully will be with us next Thursday. That's the plan. Does anybody, since we have about 5 minutes left, have questions or thoughts directly for Tino and Mayra, but Tino Mayra might, I'll leave it between the two of you. If you do, just raise your hand using the reaction app in the very bottom. We click on the little smiley face and then raise hand. I just did. Any thoughts, comments? Or simply open your mic. Tino, you always do such a great job. And I really appreciate that. Access to the slides. Sure, Tino can send, I have them.
Yeah.
And I know it's okay to send those out. So I'll send them out with the next notification, but don't forget this entire time was recorded. And so it also has the slides on it. That might be a faster way to show somebody is just turn on Tino's slides and his voice, and there you'll have it. Bill has his hand up from sacred.org.
So yeah, so Tino, I it's really interesting the stats that you showed about where the refugees are coming from in the city of San Antonio, and how we are playing such a big role nationwide in this event. I'm wondering, do you see how much longer will this go on? I mean, is there an end to this in sight, or are we just waiting for the next major world disruption, or what does the future look like for refugees coming into San Antonio?
That's a good question, Bill. I think when we're talking about the reaction to an influx that was due to a kind of crisis event like the Afghan evacuation last year, there still are Afghans that are outside the country that are waiting to come in. They're in what are called lily pad sites, U.S. military sites around the country, but there's not as many as there had been. So they're slowly coming into the country. During the Trump administration, and maybe take a step back, with the refugee resettlement program, there are a certain amount of people who are allowed to come into the United States per year as refugees. It's called the refugee cap, and it's set every year by the federal government, and depending on it varies depending on the year, and the administration, and I guess perceived world need. In the 90s, that cap was set somewhere between 100,000, 125,000 people a year. During the beginning of the 2000s, it dropped to 65, 70,000. In the Obama administration, it was in the 70, 80,000 a year. And at the very last year, the Obama administration wanted to cap at 100,000, I think, or 125. During the Trump administration, one of the first things they did was cut that way back. They're like, we're going to bring it back to 45,000 the first year. And the last year, I believe they're all the way down to 18,000 people that they were going to bring in with this formal refugee status that is a legal status, something that, entitles people to this help. So the refugee resettlement agencies around the country were kind of being, in a certain sense, starved to death. They didn't have any work other than assisting the people that were coming in from Afghanistan and Iraq. So here in San Antonio and other years, we've had a lot of people come in from many different countries through the refugee resettlement process. And then during the years of the Trump administration, it was really down to a few hundred, and not very many coming from countries other than Iraq and Afghanistan. So what's going to happen after this push of a lot of people coming from Afghanistan because of this crisis is people anticipate we'll go back to the way it was prior to the administration. We had people coming from many different countries. Like you saw, there were also people from Burma, people from Nepal, people from the Congo and in Iran who come to San Antonio as refugees. Will return to something more like that, where you have a wider variety of countries, where people have been waiting for years in in camps or in some other place outside of their country of origin, to be assigned to a country as a resettled refugee. And so again, Bill, it does happen every year. There's a certain amount of people that are supposed to come as resettled refugees. It's a commitment the United States has made. And so it's not something that I think is going to end on the former resettled refugee front. We're going to continue to see people coming in every year because we have committed ourselves to doing it as a nation. We have the infrastructure that's set up. There's things in the law that support it, and there's budget in there and support from the federal government to do it.
Oh, Michelle has one question in chat. We're at 8:56, so this will be our last. Families have been separated during the evacuation from Kabul. Is there any hope that those families can be reunited? Any hopes that the Taliban will release them? What do you know about that, Tino?
All I can say is that it's been a difficult experience getting people who didn't get out in the initial wave of evacuations to get them out of Afghanistan. And the reason why is because there's no longer a US diplomatic presence in the country. So if you want to come to the United States, you have to usually go to the consulate and apply for a visa. So they can't do that from inside the country, right? They've got to find a way out of Afghanistan first, and then from what they call a third country. So it could be like Pakistan right next door, or it could be like the United Arab Emirates, someplace like that. Then they go to a US embassy and start that process. So that's kind of where people are stuck. Finding a way of getting out of the country so they can access like our US State Department to ask for a visa or for asylum or refugee status at a US government office.
So, Mayra, do you have any last words before we sign up, or hopes?
No, this was very informative even for myself. So thank you so much. And even I see that you guys have these recording. So I'm interested in looking previous and the one that it's coming out next, I believe Thursday. So thank you so much. No, I'm here to learn. I'm here to help. Just like Tino mentioned, it takes, I really like a village to make sure that we're part of the puzzle. So I'm part of that puzzle to just make San Antonio that welcoming place and make it, I feel proud to hear, to learn that there's so many people involved in this cause, and I'm just excited. So thank you so much. And I think I need to meet some of you in person. Today is my 4th day here. So it's, I will get there to meet you all in person, because I think connecting with you in person, it's so important than just Zoom. So I'm sure I will be in touch and with you to try to figure out something and meet you in person and the rest as well.
Well, we're welcome. We're glad you're with us. I want to invite everybody to open up their mics and repeat after me. Thank you, Tino.
Thank you, Tino.
Thanks so much.
Welcome, Mayra.
Welcome,
Welcome, Mayra.
And thank you all for being here today and all the work we're doing together.
Thank you, Ann.
Yep. And we will
Thanks,
see you
Ann.
next week.